The scent of my grandmother's secret recipe meatloaf filled my Boston brownstone that Thursday evening. At 72, I'd perfected this dish over a lifetime, first for my late wife, Eleanor, and then for our son, Michael. It was more than a meal. It was a tradition, a touchstone of our family's love. Tonight, however, the air was thick with more than just the aroma of roasting herbs and tomatoes. Tonight, I was meeting the woman who had captured my son's heart, a woman named Chloe Vanderbilt, and her parents, David and Samantha, who had flown in from their home in Atlanta. What Michael didn't know, what nobody outside a select classified circle knew, was that my career before retiring to run a quiet antique bookshop hadn't been in quiet academia, as I'd always claimed. For 25 years, I was a senior analyst for the National Security Agency, my specialty buried in the nuances of Slavic languages and counterintelligence. My Russian was as fluent as my English, a skill I'd kept locked away, even from my own family, a ghost from a life I'd tried to leave behind. "Dad, they're here," Michael's voice, brimming with a hope I hadn't heard since his mother passed, echoed from the foyer. I opened the heavy oak door to find them standing on my stoop. Chloe was positioned front and center, a vision of curated perfection. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves, her smile was a brilliant, practiced curve, and her eyes held a calculated warmth. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice a smooth, honeyed contralto. She handed me an expensive bottle of Bordeaux. "Thank you so much for having us. Michael talks about you all the time. He absolutely adores you." Behind her, David and Samantha Vanderbilt offered tight, formal smiles. David's handshake was firm, almost rehearsed in its precision, while Samantha's gaze swept over my entryway, assessing, cataloging. They had the polished, slightly detached air of people used to high-stakes business meetings, not family dinners. "Please, call me Walter," I replied, stepping aside. "And thank you for this. Eleanor always loved a good Bordeaux." Michael beamed, guiding Chloe through the living room, pointing out framed photos and cherished knickknacks with a proprietor's pride. "Dad, Chloe is a rising star at the Boston Symphony's fundraising division, and she volunteers teaching music therapy to at-risk kids every weekend." "That's truly commendable, Chloe," I said, genuinely impressed, despite my innate caution. "What draws you to that kind of work?" "Oh, it's the only thing that feels real, Walter," she replied, her eyes widening with a convincing sincerity. "The corporate world can be so hollow, but seeing a child's face light up when they create a melody, that's pure magic." She squeezed Michael's hand. "It's the same feeling I get when I'm with your son." Dinner began pleasantly enough. The meatloaf was a triumph. The conversation flowed with practiced ease. David asked thoughtful questions about my book restoration work. Samantha complimented the roasted asparagus. Chloe hung on Michael's every word as he outlined their wedding plans. "We're thinking a winter wedding," Michael said, his eyes shining. "Chloe wants something intimate and elegant at the Boston Public Library. She says the architecture speaks to her soul." "It sounds perfect, son," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings." It was during dessert, my signature apple pie with a sharp cheddar crust, that the evening shattered. Chloe leaned slightly toward her parents, her voice dropping into a confidential murmur as she seamlessly switched to Russian, a language she clearly believed was her private sanctuary. My trained ears, however, caught every syllable, each one landing like a shard of ice in my veins. "This old sheep is even more gullible than I hoped," she whispered, a derisive smirk twisting her perfect lips. "He's swallowing every bit of it. Look at him, so proud of his little meal. He's soft, sentimental, an easy mark." She took a delicate sip of water, her eyes flicking toward me with contempt before turning back to her parents. "Just keep playing your parts. The concerned, respectable Southerners. David remembered to ask him about his military service again later, stroke his ego. Samantha, maybe mention how much you admire his strength as a single father. We need him fully invested, emotionally and financially. Once the trust fund is accessible, this tedious little performance can end. The casual cruelty, the sheer transactional malice in her voice, the way she directed her parents like a CEO briefing subordinates. It was a physical blow. My grip tightened on my coffee cup, the fine china threatening to crack. Adrenaline, a familiar ghost from my past, flooded my system. Every instinct screamed at me to stand, to dismantle her entire fraudulent world with a few choice phrases in her own chosen language of deceit. But a lifetime of intelligence work had drilled into me the supreme value of patience. The best interrogations weren't about loud accusations. They were about letting the subject hang themselves with the rope you quietly provided. I forced my face into a mask of benign, grandfatherly interest. I even managed a small, appreciative smile when Chloe's gaze met mine across the table. "The pie is exquisite, Walter," she said, seamlessly switching back to English. "You simply must give me the recipe. I'd love to make it for Michael someday." "Of course, my dear," I replied, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Eleanor would have been delighted to share it with you." As the evening wound down, I played the gracious host to perfection. I thanked them for coming, accepted their effusive compliments, and promised we would do it again soon. Michael walked them to their car, his face alight with a happiness that made my heart ache. He returned and wrapped me in a bear hug. "Dad, thank you. This meant the world to me. I could tell you really connected with her tonight." I nodded, squeezing his shoulder, not trusting myself to speak. As I watched his taillights disappear down the rain-slicked street, I stood in the doorway, the chill November air doing little to cool the fire in my chest. She thought I was a fool, a soft, sentimental old sheep. She had no idea she was dealing with a wolf who knew the sound of a predator's heartbeat. The familiar, comforting scent of old paper, leather bindings, and lemon polish filled my bookshop, Hawthorne's folios. It was my sanctuary, a place where problems could be solved with glue, patience, and a careful hand. This morning, however, my hands were anything but careful. I was attempting to restore a water-damaged first edition of Moby Dick, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, replaying Chloe's words in a relentless, sickening loop. Gullible old sheep. Easy mark. Sleep had been a stranger for a week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flicker of contempt in Chloe's eyes, the practiced nods of her parents. 35 years of marriage to Eleanor had taught me the depth of true love. This was its grotesque parody, and my son was the intended victim. The shop's bell chimed, and Michael ducked in, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee from the shop down the street. My boy, always so thoughtful. He had his mother's kindness in his soul. "Morning, Dad," he said, his face still carrying the afterglow of his imagined future. "You looked like you could use this. You've been working too hard." "Thanks, son." I accepted the cup, the heat a welcome anchor. Just this Melville, Mrs. Davison's pride and joy. Michael perched on the edge of my sturdy oak workbench, careful not to disturb the delicate tools. "Chloe can't stop talking about last night. She said she feels like she finally has your blessing." I set my coffee down, choosing my words with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. "She's clearly very accomplished." "She is, Dad." His smile was radiant. "She makes me want to be a better man. And her parents, they're so solid, so traditional. They remind me of the way you and Mom were." "Son," I began, my voice low and careful, "sometimes people present a very polished version of themselves. It's important to look beyond the surface." The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a defensive stiffness. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should take your time. There's no rush. Get to know them, the real them, before any legal documents are signed." "Dad, you're being unreasonable." The words were sharp, a shield going up. You spent one evening with her. She was perfect, charming, intelligent, kind, and you're already finding fault? I tried a different tact, appealing to the part of him that understood my past, even if he didn't know the details. It's not about fault, Michael. In my previous work, we learned to trust our instincts. Your instincts? He stood up, his coffee sloshing dangerously. Or your prejudices. Is that what this is about? Is it because she's from New Money? From the South? Because that's what it sounds like to me. The accusation was a well-aimed dagger. That is not fair, and you know it. Do I? His voice cracked with a devastating mix of anger and hurt. Chloe warned me this might happen. She said some old-fashioned New England families have trouble accepting outsiders, even when they claim to be open-minded. She warned him. The preemptive strike was a masterstroke of manipulation. She had positioned me as the villain before the curtain had even risen. Michael, that is not what this is about. Then what is it about, Dad? He was at the door, his hand on the knob. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already decided to hate the woman I love, for no good reason. He turned back, his eyes bright with betrayal. I thought you'd want me to be happy. Mom would have given her a chance. The door slammed shut, the bell jangling violently. Through the window, I watched him stride away, his shoulders set in a hard line. The silence he left behind was heavier than any I had known. I looked at the photograph of Eleanor on my workbench, her smile forever frozen in a moment of gentle wisdom. My compass, my conscience. She would have told me to protect our boy, no matter the cost. If words had failed, then evidence would have to succeed. And I knew exactly who to call. 3 days of sleepless nights had honed my resolve. I'd spent the dark hours mentally scrolling through a Rolodex of ghosts, men and women I'd served with, whose skills and connections were as shadowy as the work we'd done. Most were scattered, retired, or dead. But one name stood out, Frankie the Badger Tonelli. We'd been junior analysts together, fresh out of training. He was a bulldog of a man, relentless and fiercely loyal, with a mind that could find patterns in chaos. Last I heard, he'd parlayed his skills into a lucrative private security and investigation firm in D.C. If anyone could help me dig into the Vanderbilt family quietly and thoroughly, it was Frankie. The drive to Washington was a blur of autumn foliage and grim determination. I met him in the back booth of a dimly lit Italian restaurant in Georgetown, a place that smelled of garlic and old money. Frankie hadn't changed much, a little thicker around the middle, his hair now a distinguished silver, but his eyes still held the same sharp, assessing glint. "Walter Hawthorne," he grunted, sliding into the booth. "When you called, I thought my secure line had been compromised by a ghost. 30 years and you need a favor. Must be serious." "It is, Frankie. It's about Michael." His expression softened immediately. He'd been at Michael's college graduation, had always sent a birthday card. In our world, our colleagues' families became our own. "What's wrong? Is he in trouble?" "Not yet. But he's heading for a cliff, and he's got his eyes closed." I slid my phone across the table, displaying the photos Michael had proudly shared. "He's engaged to this woman, Chloe Vanderbilt. Her parents are David and Samantha. Something is off." Frankie studied the images, his analyst's mind already at work. "Define off." "Inconsistencies. The way they interact is too polished, like they're reading from a script. Their stories are just a little too perfect. Their backgrounds a little too vague. And some things I overheard." I paused, unable to reveal my linguistic ace. My gut is screaming. The same scream I used to get before a mission meant sideways. "Your gut was never wrong," he said, handing back the phone. "What do you need?" "A deep background check. All 3 of them. Chloe Vanderbilt, David, and Samantha. They claim to be from old Atlanta money. I need to know if they are who they say they are. Financials, property records, family history, employment, the full workup. Frankie nodded, pulling out a small, encrypted notebook. I can run them through every database I have access to, public and private. It'll take a few days to be thorough and stay under the radar. I slid a piece of paper across the table with their names, the address Michael had, and their dates of birth. This stays between us, Frankie. This is for my son. It always does, Walter. You'll have what I find in 72 hours. He studied my face. You look tired, my friend. This is more than just a father's worry, isn't it? I met his gaze. Frankie, my son is in love with a phantom. And if I'm right, when he finds out, it's going to break him. Frankie's expression was grave. I'll start today. We shook hands outside the restaurant, a familiar, somber ritual. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of control. The hunt was on. The next 48 hours were an exercise in agonizing patience. I threw myself into my work, restoring books with a furious intensity that left my regular customers impressed and slightly concerned. Chloe visited Michael twice during that period, and I forced myself to be cordial, to play the part of the chastened father trying to make amends. She was flawless, the picture of graciousness. She brought me a first edition Robert Frost she'd found at a flea market, which was a lie. I could tell it was a modern, high-quality forgery. Asked about my time in the academy, and complimented the family photos. But I watched her now, looking for the cracks. They were there, subtle as hairline fractures in porcelain. The way her eyes would momentarily harden when Michael wasn't looking. The practiced, almost mechanical quality of her laughter. And the way she deftly changed the subject whenever the conversation veered towards specific details of her childhood or her parents' business. On Thursday evening, my encrypted burner phone buzzed with a text from Frankie. We need to talk. In person. It's worse than we thought. My hands were steady as I drove to a prearranged spot, a deserted overlook on the George Washington Memorial Parkway. The Potomac flowed dark and silent below. Frankie was already there, leaning against his car, a thick dossier in his hand. Get in, he said, sliding into my passenger seat. No electronic devices. Inside the car, he opened the folder. The contents made my blood run cold. Walter, your instincts were dead on. Chloe Vanderbilt is a complete fabrication. He handed me a driver's license photo from Georgia. The face was similar, but the name was different. Her real name is Brandy Welch. She is a con artist from Macon with a record for petty fraud and forgery. The real Chloe Vanderbilt died of SIDS in 1989. Brandy somehow obtained her birth certificate and social security number and has been building this identity for the last 5 years. The next page was a printout from a talent agency website. Headshots for actors named Robert Miller and Cynthia Shaw, listed under corporate role play and family portrayal services. The faces were unmistakably David and Samantha. They're not her parents, I stated, the reality settling like a stone in my gut. Hired actors. We contacted the agency. They confirmed they were booked for a long-term family integration role for a Chloe Vanderbilt at $500 per hour per actor. The engagement photos Michael showed you? Frankie showed me a side-by-side comparison. The background is a rental studio in New York. The same setup appears in a dozen other stock photo portfolios online. She's done this before, Walter. This is her play. Then came the final, devastating blow. Frankie handed me a marriage license, certified and official, from the state of Alabama. Brandy Welch, a.k.a. Chloe Vanderbilt, is currently married to a man named Jake the Snake Malone. He's a known associate of several organized crime families in Biloxi, specializing in insurance fraud and asset stripping. The marriage is legal and binding. She never divorced him. I stared at the document. The scale of the deception was staggering. This is a federal crime spree. Marriage fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. If she marries Michael, she gets access to his trust fund, the one Eleanor's father set up. Then once she's legally his wife, she and Malone clean him out. If Michael is truly in the dark, he's a victim. But if the feds think for a second he was complicit, Frankie let the sentence hang in the air. He could face charges or, at the very least, to be financially ruined and tied up in litigation for years. I organized the documents, my mind shifting from father to strategist. What's our next move? Well, officially, I should report this to the FBI. This has all the markings of a sophisticated criminal operation. Unofficially, Frankie looked at me, his expression grim. You need to get him away from her, now, before this explodes. He won't listen. He thinks I'm a bigot. Then you need proof he can't ignore. Frankie gathered the documents and handed me a copy of the dossier. I'll hold off on my official report for 48 hours. That's all the time I can give you, Walter. After that, this becomes a federal case and I can't control it. I accepted the folder. Thank you, Frankie. Just protect your boy, Walter. Driving home, the weight of the dossier in the passenger seat felt like it contained the shattered pieces of my son's future. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that I was just a paranoid old man seeing ghosts, but the evidence was irrefutable. This was no simple gold digger. This was a predator working with a pack. Frankie's contact at the FBI was a brisk, efficient woman named Special Agent Diana Moss. By Monday morning, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the Boston field office, the dossier spread between us. She was in her late 40s, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing and a non-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Hawthorne, this is a compelling package of evidence. These types of long con operations are complex and damaging. My question is, how do you want to proceed? I want her away from my son, and I want him to understand the truth without being destroyed by it. We have enough to arrest Brandy Welch on identity theft and fraud charges immediately. However, she leant forward, steepling her fingers, I'd prefer to build a stronger case, one that ensures a conviction and potentially uncovers her connection to Malone and his organization. To do that, we need her to incriminate herself further. She studied me carefully. You mentioned she's comfortable in your home, that she believes her deception is successful. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled operation? The weight of her request was immense. You want me to invite her back with full surveillance? We would wire your home, have a tactical team positioned nearby. If she says anything incriminating, especially regarding the larger conspiracy, we'd have it on record. It would also protect your son from any future accusations of involvement. I thought of Michael's betrayed face. He would have to be there. He would have to witness it. My son? He's completely in the dark. He'll be there. That might work to our advantage. If she believes she's won, that you've fully accepted her, she may become overconfident, careless. Agent Moss's expression was professional but not without empathy. I understand this is an enormous ask. It puts you in an impossible position with your family. Agent Moss, I said, my voice firm, my son is planning to marry a criminal who's already married to a known felon. She is using him to commit federal crimes. Any difficulty with my family is secondary to saving him from that. She nodded. How would you approach it? I'll tell him I was wrong, that I've thought it over and I want to make amends. He's been desperate for us to reconcile. He'll jump at the chance to arrange another dinner. And she will come. She thinks she's manipulated him into turning against me. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to gloat, to solidify her victory. We'll need 48 hours to set up. Can you arrange the dinner for Friday? I'll call him today. Mr. Hawthorne, I said as I stood to leave, be very sure. Once we activate this, there's no going back. Your son will witness the woman he loves being arrested in his father's home. It will be traumatic. I met her gaze. It will be less traumatic than marrying her. The phone call to Michael was one of the hardest performances of my life. Son, I began, my voice carefully calibrated to sound weary and contrite. I owe you a profound apology. The silence on the other end was deafening. Dad? I've done nothing but think about our argument, and you were right. I was unfair. I let my own fears cloud my judgment. I didn't give Chloe a real chance. Are you serious? He whispered. I'd like to invite her and her parents back for dinner on Friday night. A do-over. I want to start over and get to know the woman who makes my son so happy. The relief in his voice was a palpable, painful thing. Dad, wow, yes, of course. She's going to be so relieved. She was heartbroken that she'd caused a rift between us. Tell her the fault was mine. I'm looking forward to making it right. After he hung up, the silence in my bookshop was absolute. In 3 days, I would sit across from Chloe Vanderbilt, or Brandy Welch, and watch as the life she had constructed for my son was systematically dismantled by federal agents. I was setting a trap in my own home with my own son as the bait. Friday evening arrived with a clear, cold sky. The stage was set. My home was wired for audio and video. Agent Moss and her team were in a van down the street. I felt the familiar, cold focus of a long, past operation settle over me. They arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. Chloe was radiant in a deep blue dress, her smile triumphant. She carried an ostentatious bouquet of lilies. "Walter," she gushed, embracing me, "thank you for this. It means the world to us." David and Samantha were their usual polished selves, their smiles a little less tight now, believing their mission was accomplished. "Please come in," I said, my voice warm. "I've been looking forward to this." Michael was practically vibrating with happiness, his earlier anger completely forgotten. He guided them into the living room, his arm around Chloe, his faith in our happy future restored. Dinner was a repeat of the first, but the subtext was a chasm beneath our feet. I played my part to perfection, asking Chloe about her work, complimenting David on his tie, agreeing with Samantha about a recent film. I was the picture of a reconciled, doting future father-in-law. As we finished the main course, Chloe looked at me, her head tilted. "You seem so much more at ease tonight, Walter. I have to admit I was worried after our last dinner that I'd somehow offended you." "Not at all," I said smoothly. "Sometimes first impressions can be deceiving." We moved to the living room for coffee and pie, bypassing the more formal dining setting. The atmosphere was deliberately more intimate. This was the moment. My heart was a steady, cold drumbeat in my chest. "Chloe," I began, setting my coffee cup down with a soft click, "I've been thinking a lot about our first dinner together." She smiled, a glint of smug victory in her eyes. "Oh, I hope it was a pleasant memory for you." I switched to Russian, my voice low and calm, devoid of all warmth. "Did you truly believe I was the fool you named me?" The transformation was instantaneous. Her face went bone white. The coffee cup she was holding rattled violently in its saucer. Her parents froze, their eyes wide with panic. I don't know what you mean," she stammered in Russian. "You called me an old sheep, gullible, sentimental, an easy mark. You said that once the trust fund was accessible, this tedious little performance could end." Michael stared, his brain struggling to process the alien language flowing from his father's mouth. "Dad, what are you saying? You speak Russian? Since when?" "That's because Chloe isn't her real name, son," I said, switching back to English, my voice now hard as flint. "Her name is Brandy Welch." "You're lying," Brandy shrieked, her composure shattering. Her American accent slipped, a hint of a southern twang bleeding through. "Michael, he's insane. He's making this up to break us up." "She's already married," I pressed, relentless, "to a man named Jake Malone, a criminal. These aren't her parents. They're actors, Robert and Cynthia. $500 an hour." Robert David shot to his feet. "This is slander. We're leaving." "Sit down, Mr. Miller," I commanded, my voice brooking no argument. The Arlington Talent Agency was very cooperative with the FBI. "The FBI?" Michael whispered, his world collapsing in real time. The doorbell rang, a sharp, authoritative sound. I walked to the door and opened it. Agent Moss stood there, flanked by 2 other agents, their badges held high. "Brandy Welch, also known as Chloe Vanderbilt, you are under arrest for identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and interstate transportation of stolen property. You have the right to remain silent." The performance was over. Brandy erupted in a torrent of curses, a vile mix of English and Russian that revealed the true ugly soul beneath the designer clothes. She was handcuffed, her screams echoing in my foyer as she was led away. Robert and Cynthia, weeping, were read their rights as material witnesses. The silence they left behind was absolute, broken only by the sound of Michael's ragged breathing. He was still sitting on the sofa, staring at the empty space where his future had been.
his hands trembling violently. He finally looked at me, his eyes those of a stranger. "All this time, you knew? You knew when you didn't tell me?" "I tried, Michael. You wouldn't listen." "You speak Russian," he said, the statement laden with betrayal. "You were, what, a spy? And you never told me? My whole life, you lied to me." "I lied to protect you, to protect the life your mother and I built for you. Don't you dare bring Mom into this," he shouted, surging to his feet. "She would have been honest with me. She would have trusted me." He shoved past me, heading for the door. "Michael, wait!" He turned at the door, his face a mask of anguish. "You set this whole thing up. You brought her here. You invited me, knowing what was going to happen. You used me. You used my love for her as a weapon." He didn't wait for a response. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the wired, silent house, the scent of lilies and betrayal hanging heavy in the air. A week passed, 7 days of utter silence. Agent Moss called with updates. Brandy was cooperating, giving up Jake Malone in exchange for a reduced sentence. The actors had been released and were providing valuable testimony. The legal machine was grinding on, but my world had stopped. I tried calling. I sent texts. Nothing. The silence was a physical presence in my brownstone, louder than any argument. I had saved my son from financial ruin and a life of lies, but in doing so, I had shattered his trust in me. The cost felt immeasurable. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Michael standing there, drenched and hollow-eyed. He looked older, the last vestiges of his boyish hope stripped away. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I stepped aside. He walked into the living room, not bothering to take off his wet coat. He stood before the fireplace, looking at the family photos on the mantel. "The FBI agent, Moss, she came to see me. She showed me everything. The real birth certificate, the marriage license to that Malone guy, the actor contracts. She said if it wasn't for you, I'd be in jail, or broke, or both." I stayed silent, letting him talk. "I've been so angry," he said, his shoulders slumping. "At her, at myself, but mostly at you, for not telling me who you were, for handling me, for being the puppet master." He finally turned to face me, his expression raw. "But the truth is, you were right. I was blind. I was so desperate for the fairy tale she was selling that I refused to see the truth, even when my own father was trying to show me. I called you a bigot. I threw Mom in your face." His voice broke. "How do you forgive someone for that?" The weight of the past month lifted from my shoulders. "Michael, look at me. There's nothing to forgive. Loving someone isn't a crime. Trusting someone isn't a flaw. It's who you are. It's the best part of you. Your mother, she would have seen what I saw, but she would have loved you for the hope in your heart. I love you for that too." Tears finally streamed down his face. "I'm so sorry, Dad." I crossed the room and pulled him into a tight embrace. "Oh, son, me too. Me too." We talked long into the night. I told him about my real work at the NSA, about the things I'd seen and done, about why it had to remain a secret. I showed him the dossier Frankie had compiled. He asked hard questions, and I gave him honest answers. The wall between us, built on lies, hers and my omissions, began to crumble. A month later, Michael started coming to the bookshop on Saturdays again, just like when he was a teenager. We didn't talk about Brandy or the past. We talked about books, about the Red Sox, about the future. The wounds were healing, slowly. One afternoon, as we were sorting a new shipment of books,
He looked at me thoughtfully. "Dad, that night, how did you stay so calm? How did you sit there knowing what she was and not just lose it?" I set down the book I was holding, considering my answer. "Because, Michael, when you're protecting what you love most, your own feelings don't matter. The mission is everything. The mission was you." He nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. He was learning to see the world not with cynical eyes, but with wise ones. He was learning to trust his instincts without closing his heart. Looking back, I realized that stories of betrayal aren't just about the lie, they're about the strength we find to confront it. This journey taught me that a father's love isn't measured by blind trust, but by the courage to act when that trust is being weaponized. God gives us instincts for a reason. That feeling in your gut, that whisper of doubt when something seems too perfect, isn't paranoia, it's a divine warning. The hardest lesson was learning that sometimes protecting someone means allowing them to hate you if it means saving them from a greater evil. Michael's anger was a fire I had to walk through to pull him to safety. Now, as I lock up the shop for the night, I look at the photograph of Eleanor on my desk. Our boy is safe. He's wiser now, but not broken. He's stronger. And so am I. A father's duty really never ends. We stand watch, long after our children believe they no longer need us, armed with the hard-won wisdom of a life lived, ready to step out of the shadows when the wolf comes calling, dressed in sheep's clothing.